Gentlemen, when we last left off, we just entered talking about the Aegean world, and that is the region that the famous Greeks are from. And if you see that Greeks, its heart are dead in the heart of the Aegean Sea, as well as the Ionian Sea, and south here is the Mediterranean Sea. The interesting thing about Greece is a small country, 45,000 square miles. It's a bunch of small plains and river valleys with a lot of mountain ranges that are all rugged. So they're pretty high, but they're spread out. And one of the things that's going to lead to, it's going to lead to the mountain ranges isolating Greek communities. So the Greeks are not going to form as united people. And there are going to be some advantages to that. We're going to see we get democracy out of our Greeks. We're going to see that we get a lot of involvement of individual citizens in daily life. But it's going to create a lot of disunity, and people don't view themselves as Greeks. People are going to view themselves as Romans, or excuse me, as Spartans, or as Athenians, or they're from Thebes, or they're from Corinth, or they're from Troy. They're not going to view themselves as Greeks. The first Greeks, however, were a group of people named the Minoans, and they were discovered by this guy, Sir Arthur Evans, in 1906. They were found to have lived on this island of Crete. If I go back to the first picture here, Crete is a small island down smack dab in the heart of the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, and they're a civilization that we know existed from 2800 BC to 1450. We know that they lived at the palace at Knossos, this beautiful palace. But what we don't know is what happened to them. We just know that they ended suddenly. And historians have a bunch of different theories as to why they ended. We know about their lifestyle because of the frescoes that are inside the palace at Knossos. These paintings on the wall that tell us what kind of lives they lived. They were into fishing. Some of them were into hunting. Into the arts and into sports and athletics as well. And this is sort of a blueprint of the palace. You can see it's a very complex blueprint. And only thing we really know is that they were a very civilized people, because that palace is massive. That palace is very detailed. And that palace tells us a whole lot about their lifestyles. Right here, you see that maybe they were into the art of boxing. These frescoes depicts images of a fight that's taking place. We also see animals that perhaps the Minoans enjoyed hunting as well. But we also know that the Minoan civilization sat in the heart of a massive volcano zone. And many historians believe that there was a massive volcanic eruption that took place in 1400 that may have just completely wiped out the Minoan people. They also practice and believe in many myths. The myth of the Minotaur, which is a maze with a half-bull, half-man creature. And every year children were sacrificed there. They believed in the myth of Atlantis, which is a story by Plato that talks about this ideal world that sunk into the sea. And who knows, could it possibly be that volcanic spot at Thera impacted the Minoans? However, most historians are on the page that the Minoans' disappearance happened at the hands of these people, the Mycenaeans, and they were discovered by this German guy, Heinrich Schliemann, who basically sought out to prove that the Iliad, remember we talked about the works of Homer, the Iliad was historically true. Okay, so he went and discovered these people groups. And what he found, that there was this historic civilization from 1400 to 1100 BC. And perhaps they were this warrior-based aristocracy. And so all of these things point to the fact that maybe when the Minoans disappeared, they didn't disappear because, some volcano took them out. Maybe they disappeared because some people group took them out. The Minoans were known for their warrior-based aristocracy. They were known for their elitism in war. Here are some of the artifacts we find in history of their shields and some of the things they had to protect themselves. And you look at the stone walls in the background here that shows some of their cities and how they may have protected themselves. But let's talk a little bit about the Greeks, the people who preceded the Romans. the central idea I want you to get from the Greeks is their belief in the polis, or that is the institution of Greek life. Greek life demanded that you were a part of the polis. And a polis is a small autonomous political unit. So just pretty much think about it as not like a national government or a state government, but it's basically local government that carries on all of those same functions. And it's not just a city, but it is a community of citizens. So think of the polis of Towson, right? We are a community, and it's a tiny urban area surrounded by countryside. And all of us control the lives that we live. Just some further insight. According to Aristotle, the polis was the source of identity. The polis was the people, says Alcaicus. Not houses finely roofed or the stones of walls well built, nay, nor canals and dockyards make a polis, but men able to use their opportunity. Thucydides said men make the polis. So you are your community. You vote on your community. You control what happens in your community. And you also fight for your community. And the idea of a Greek hoplite or a foot soldier developed out of the fact that Greeks had to defend themselves. So a hoplite was a foot soldier armed with a long shield, a spear, and a short sword, always prepared for combat. They fought in 8x8 formations. So we're going to virtually have the elimination of class structure here, where in previous societies, the aristocracy was the one that was used to defend the people. And so since they also controlled daily life. But in Greece, everyone fought, rich, poor, in between. And there was no cavalry because that also meant that you had money if you could afford horses. And only citizens served. So the polis and the fact that everyone was hoplite fighting in this phalanx formation, this 8x8 formation, equalized the community. Here's a little image of what the formation kind of looked like. Okay, every man uses a shield to protect themselves, and I am now protecting the guy. Not only am I protecting myself, but I'm protecting the guy next to me. The phalanx was also the source of democracy. The aristocrats could no longer pose as their city's indispensable protectors, like I just spoke. Famous people groups, the Spartans from 740 BC are going to create a different type of lifestyle. They're going to create this military society where all citizens are soldiers, and the social structure is going to have citizens, middle class, and then slaves. But everyone's lives were regulated. Children were inspected at birth because they were basically going to have their whole lives planned, and their general purpose was to serve Sparta, who constantly lived in a perpetual state of war. They trained rigorously. If you've seen the movie 300, it gives you a good insight as to what the Spartans wanted to do. Not everything in there is accurate, but that's virtually the lifestyle of a Spartan. There was an absence of luxury in their culture. Men lived in barracks. Their money was iron. They had little trade and few craftsmen. Okay, they ate together, and everyone had the same amount of land, and there were no noble titles. Women in Sparta were encouraged to exercise in order to raise healthy children. They weren't encouraged to wear jewelry. They practiced and celebrated many festivals of childbirth, and the woman's duty was to create a great Spartan man. The women were also the head of household because the husband lived in barracks. So just imagine if your mom and dad were married, but your dad never lived at home because he was living in this war community, and your mom basically had to run the show simply because the state took your dad in a constant state of training. That was Spartan life. But they did have more freedom than women in other societies. All right, so here's the general government structure of Spartan society, but the basic thing you need to know is that Sparta is going to be a type of government called an oligarchy, which is ruled by a few. Okay, so you have kings, you have ephors, these elders. You have a council. This is the elder, excuse me. Then you're going to have a council of of people who help make decisions. Then you have their counterpart, Athens, which is the complete opposite, that encourage education. They encourage law. They encourage people, knowledge, and individual participation. But Athens is going to shift. In its early days under the leadership of Draco and Solon, Athens is going to practice harsh laws and treating their people based off of rigid social classes. But over time, you're going to see that the Athenians are going to switch, and they're going to basically develop the semblances of a democracy where you have councils who are chosen by random, and you're going to have all these different areas to help make decisions. Our Greek culture is very, very, very prominent because it gives us certain things. It gives us history, which means inquiry, and that's going to be shown in the works of two famous historians, Herodotus and Thucydides. Okay, and that's going to be the biggest thing, is that they're the contribution of history, the contribution of drama in the story of Oedipus Rex, which you will cover in your English courses, so we're not going to spend time talking about it. Greeks give us contribute philosophy, or the love of wisdom, by their famous philosophers Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato. These guys called themselves wandering teachers who felt that inquiry was a moral responsibility, that all people had the right to ask questions, but ask questions that were used to improve the lives of themselves and the lives of others. And if you weren't asking questions and you weren't examining your life and the constant state of your society, then that life was not worth living, as exemplified by this Socrates quote: "The unexamined life is not worth living." And Socrates, and the belief in this philosophy is going to be seen by the fact that Socrates is going to be put to death simply for the accusation of corrupting the youth through his teaching. And he never puts up a fight when he's up on trial. He takes his punishment because he truly believed in that. The Greeks are going to contribute sculpture to us. And that's going to be a major contribution. And one of the more famous things you see is that the Greeks are going to have these wars with the Persians. First, Darius is going to fight the Battle of Marathon, where we get the famous runner, Phidippides. Any cross-country people in here, the Battle of Marathon is where we get the name for the race marathon, because Phidippides was told to go gather more soldiers as they were fighting the Persians, simply because the Persians were outnumbering the Greeks. And so he ran 24.8 miles from Marathon to Athens to alert that they needed more soldiers, hence the term marathon. The Greeks are going to survive that one, but 10 years later, the Persians are going to return for a rematch at Thermopylae, this narrow mountain pass, and eventually King Leonidas and the Spartans are going to be defeated because of this great traitor Ephialtes. Then you'll have Philip of Macedonia after that revive the phalanx and add a cavalry. Philip is going to be the father of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great is going to be this guy who conquers the world in 12 years. He's going to have the world's largest empire. And he goes on and he wants to conquer the whole world and gets to China, but his people mutiny at a certain point. His empire is going to be vast and great. He's going to spread Greek culture. He's going to end the polis, and he's going to show you how to have an autocratic rule of government based off of military strength. The last thing I really wanted to say is this. It's easy to just come up on Rome and say that the Romans did all this all by themselves and that they just developed here without giving appropriate credit to who deserves it. Without the impact of the previous civilizations, the door of the world would not be open. Without the achievements of Philip and Alexander the Great, neither the Roman Empire nor the diffusion of Christianity would have been conceivable. Thank you, gentlemen.